In Mallory's final sermon a few weeks ago, she noted that we are less good at naming where our joy is than we are at looking at what hurts. And she encouraged us to tend our joy as much as and as effectively as we tend our pain. And today I'm going to encourage us to start doing that. I don't remember exactly when the word sermon in the order of service got changed to wisdom sharing. I really love that. All of us in this room have wisdom, so our wisdom sharing time today is not just going to be me talking to you, talking with you, talking at you. It isn't even just going to be you talking to the room. It's going to be a little bit of you talking to one another. So, warning now, we're going to have a couple of parent shares in the midst of this. So, to get us oriented, I'd like to start with a quote from the Spirituality and Practice community. And Dave, if you would pull up that next slide. Great. So, this reads, "Joy is an essential spiritual practice growing out of faith, grace, gratitude, hope, and love. It is the pure and simple delight in being alive. Joy is our elated response to feelings of happiness, experiences of pleasure, and awareness of abundance. It is also the deep satisfaction we know when we are able to serve others and be glad for their good fortune." So before we get to today's scripture, we're going to do a couple of those pair and shares. And here's the first set of questions. It's fine to just leave that slide up until the next slide, which is a little bit later. So, 2 questions to start us. What does joy feel like? How do you know when you're joyful? So with that in mind, find a partner. You're going to take about a minute each. And I know it'll take us a minute to get partners, that's fine. Share your time fairly, please. And I will call us back after, give or take 2 minutes. But tell each other, what does joy feel like to you? How do you know when you're joyful? Please share. And yes, 3 people is fine. Okay, take about 1 more minute on this. Okay, who would like to share their wisdom about joy with the room? So we're going to do the usual hands up if you're willing to share something here. Cindy.
Well, John and I shared, and John has a tickle in his tummy. And For me, it's a deep sense of gratitude, but both of us agreed that those two things result in laughter and giggles.
Laughter and giggles. And just a warning, Malcolm, we're going to do another one of these in a couple of minutes, so I don't know if you want to move back quite yet, but anyone else want to share what joy is like to them or means to them? Okay. Colton.
I like playing with my daddy, and I like helping others.
That's awesome.
Oh, I like being with Colton.
That's great. Now, you're actually anticipating the next question, which is what brings you joy. But does anyone else want to say anything about how joy feels or how you know when you're joyful before we move on to that other question? Okay, Deborah.
I don't drink sodas, but that's how it feels inside, bubbly, and then I catch myself giggling, and then I know this must be joy.
So we have a trend going on with the giggling thing. That's great. Anne Lamott once said that laughter is carbonated holiness, and I think that's just a marvelous quote. Okay, who's got Harima? Oh, Bill? Okay.
Whenever we say anything silly and we both start laughing.
So more with the laughter, okay.
Yes.
That's fabulous, okay. And I know for me that joy often feels really expansive, and there's a real sense of ease and peace to it. This tells me that I need to giggle more. I'm clearly not giggling enough. Okay, so our next question, okay. Lori, thank you. I experienced joy this week when my students searched for their missing gingerbread people that mysteriously were not in the oven. Dum, da, dum, dum. I felt a happy shiver and happy tears in my eyes. That's wonderful. Thank you, Lori. Joy can, in fact, involve tears. That's a good thing to remember. And Lori, thank you for helping us transition to the next question. The next question is, what occasions of joy are there in your life? What makes you joyful? So not just how does it feel, but like what's going on when you're feeling joy. Turn to your partner and share one more time. Again, about 2 minutes, or 3 for the groups of 3. Okay, take about 1 more minute with this. Okay, so who would like to share what brings them joy? And I'm actually going to start with looking at the, we actually have an announcement / question. And yes, Carolyn, I'll interrupt the joy conversation to say several of us will still be here after church, so yes, you absolutely can bring or have someone bring in some donations. We'll get back to missions in some detail a little bit later on. But anyone on Zoom who would like to talk about what brings them joy? Harima, go ahead.
So my seat in the dining room table faces the patio, and I get great joy because I sit down and then the birds start coming in. Sometimes they're not there until I sit down. It's almost like they're saying, "Hello, Mrs. King." and I say good morning to them, and that brings me great joy.
That's absolutely delightful. I don't know if we should be worried that the birds are like stalking you, though, but that is a wonderful thing. What brings other people joy? Yeah, Dave.
So we're gonna continue with the animal theme because both Sarah and I, we have a new puppy, we've had about a month now, and every once in a while he just does surprising things that just bring joy. And Sarah's got a cat, and so animals in both cases, and once in a while they just help calm you and just bring you joy, because there can be calming joy too. Anything else?
Who else? Oh, Linda, okay. This is great getting my steps in.
Along the same lines, I have a herd of squirrels I feed. We've got one big tree right out kind of behind my patio, and I've been feeding the squirrels all summer and all fall, and sometimes the boys are just amazed because there can be 6 at a time right there under the tree.
That's pretty amazing. Other joys, okay. Okay, yep. Let's see. So Lori writes, time spent with Sebastian and Stella always brings me joy. They spent hours playing together harmoniously, mostly, with an old racetrack. Lori, you could be a stand-up comedian if you ever want to stop teaching. With an old racetrack, which they say is the best thing at Grandma's house. Amy writes, my cat brings me joy as well. That's wonderful. All right. Malcolm, sorry about that.
We found 2 strangers smiling at you for the first time, and mine, which I didn't realize, was potlucks. You had potluck last week. It was wonderful. Please, that's joy. Okay. Make sense?
The joy of potlucks makes total sense. And I'll add to that along this sort of nature line, looking at oceans brings me just fabulous joy. And looking at a big blue sky brings me great joy as well. So those are a couple of ones. Well, thank you all for experimenting with this pair and share thing. The rest of our interactions today are going to be the more traditional, just you talk to the room, but thanks for being willing to be a little adventurous and experimental there. So now, we get to the scripture today. And I picked these scriptures because I find it really interesting and meaningful that we see joy both at the beginning and end of Jesus' life in terms of these 2 scriptures. So Luke and John give us extremely different understandings of who Jesus was and what he was about. We'll talk about that more over the years to come. But for the moment, the Lucan passage, of course, is super familiar, both in churches at Advent and Christmas time, and of course for those of us who grew up with a Charlie Brown Christmas and who remember Linus speaking these words out loud. The angel says, I'm bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. So there's really 3 important phrases in that. Good news, great joy, and all the people. And remember, all the people includes us today. So, given this passage in Luke, what the angel says according to Luke, we should not be surprised how much joy figures in our Advent and Christmas carols. A couple of weeks ago, I went back and looked at O Come, Emmanuel, and the phrase that appears the most often in it is, of course, O come, which repeats a lot. But what we hear the second most often in that is the word rejoice. We hear it twice every single chorus or bridge or break. I'm not really sure what we call that part of the song. Then, of course, there's O Come All Ye Faithful, which we will, I'm presuming, sing on Christmas Eve. Joy isn't in the title, but it's literally the word right after the title. O come all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. And of course, there is that great Christmas carol, Joy to the World, which is what I named today's wisdom sharing in honor of. So there's a lot of joy in this season, and it's wonderful that we have kind of a day in Advent to focus on it. Now, I said a minute ago that there's kind of 3 parts of this phrase in Luke. And perhaps we don't talk about this often enough, but that first phrase, good news. So that's kind of why we're here today. That's kind of what we're doing here in a way. That we think there is some good news in this story, in the Christmas story, in the Nativity, in the life of Jesus, in the work of Jesus, in the faith of Jesus. And we may interpret this differently. But I don't think we stop often enough and go, there's good news. There's some kind of good news. We all figure out what it means for us separately in some ways. But I want us to take a little time with that good news right now and think about that good news and about that joy. So from the phrase good news, we get the word gospel. Also through the Greek, we get the term evangelism, evangelizing, evangelical. So these terms are all related. So my next question for the open room, no more parent shares, is how do you understand the good news? What is the gospel as you make sense of it? And it is fine, just to be clear for new people in this space, everyone might have a slightly different answer, and that's fine. We are not a congregation that focuses on creeds. There's not a right answer. In fact, I'm not even going to answer this question myself because I don't want any of you to mistakenly think that I think I have the right answer. So I'm not going to answer this. But I am going to ask you, how do you understand the good news? What is the gospel as you make sense of it? And where is the joy in that? So, time for wisdom sharing. Good news, gospel, joy. More easy questions. Yes, thank you, Linda. I suspect you're being sarcastic, but all right, let's start with that. Actually, let's start with Linda.
To me, the good news is that good and God are present in all things.
Deborah.
My brain works in metaphors. I see the roots of a beautiful old tree. The good news is the roots, and from that all comes. So I know I say this a lot. What's our theology for the way we act, what we do, what we value? So that's the roots and the trunk of this giant old tree. And then all the other stuff are the branches and the leaves and all that good stuff. And sometimes it looks like it's naked and dying, but then seasons change.
Thank you. Who else wants to take a shot at this easy question? Joyce.
The way I see it is the good news was Jesus coming to earth to be that bridge between heaven and God and humans and to share God's wisdom with us.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom before we keep going around the room? Harima, go ahead.
For me, it's learning that Jesus wants us to bring heaven to earth by us taking actions to help others. And there's great joy in serving.
Great joy in serving, indeed. Thank you, Harima. All right, Cindy.
This is really complex for me to explain, but I'm going to give it my best shot. There is a wonder in our creation that connects us all through the life force that brought us here, that is unknown, and we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. But what is absolute joy for me is knowing that when I am doing my best, whether I make a mistake or not, that everything I do connects to God's plan, and that each of us, no matter where we come from, is contributing to the Creator's goal to bring us into connection. I'm sorry that was rough, but that's the best I can do to explain it.
That's pretty fabulous. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. So that's Luke. Then we get to John. And of course, this brief passage we have from John is part of this wildly long set of discourses that, according to John, Jesus gives at the Last Supper. John's Jesus is quite the philosopher, and in some ways very different from the Jesus of the other Gospels. But what I find really kind of compelling about this, and I'm going to start by rereading the core line in this passage. According to John, Jesus says, "I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." And I want us now to imagine zooming out as though we were behind a camera. When we're really zoomed in, we are looking at Jesus saying these things to Jesus' disciples according to John. But John is writing at least 65, if not more years after the death of Jesus. So what John is putting in Jesus' mouth here, which Jesus may or may not have said, is really something that John is intending for John's community, okay? So this is really important. The first level of zooming out here, I'm backward doing a camera, which shows you how old I am, because cameras don't work like this anymore, right? But so the first zooming out is from Jesus saying this to Jesus' disciples, to John saying this to John's community. Now we're going to, zoom out even further. We can, I think, act on the assumption that just as Jesus said this or something like this to Jesus' disciples, John said this to John's community, that Jesus would want or wants, whatever language you like, our joy to be complete as well. This is not just language that Jesus said to a few people that was not for anyone else. This is not even just language that John said to John's community that wasn't for anyone else. We have this today because the scholars and scribes of the church felt that Jesus' joy should be in all of us, and all of our joy should be complete. So, with that way of thinking about John, next question for the room, and again, I'm not going to answer this, but I hope some of you will. What is Jesus joyful about, and what should we be joyful about? And once again, if there are as many answers as there are people in the room, that's just fine. We can all learn from each other. What is Jesus joyful about? What should we be joyful about? Who wants to give that one a try? Oh, hang on. Okay, Malcolm?
Jesus is joyful because he knows that you have what it takes to hang in there to get to the good stuff.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else want to take a try at Jesus' joy? Linda.
I think Jesus is joyful because he has an intimate relationship with God.
Awesome. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Harima, go ahead.
I like to expand on what Linda just said. That not only does he have a joyful relationship with God, but he's been able to share with others, so they can also have that relationship with God.
Okay. Barbara, go ahead.
Well, this may be just repeating things that other people have said, but I think Jesus was joyful because of the presence of God within him and around him. And we can be joyful because we have the same, presence with us.
Thank you. Lori, I see you came on camera. Did you want to add something here? Okay, I think I'm guessing not, but okay. Any last thoughts on the joy of Jesus before we move on? Okay.
Lori does want to speak. She was just muted.
Go ahead. You're still muted. You're still muted. You're still muted. Do you want to maybe put it in the chat? No? Okay. Okay, Bob, go ahead. Oh, in the chat. Okay, go ahead. Good news is that the Messiah is not a warrior king to restore the kingdom of Israel, but one who teaches us we are all, Jew and Gentiles of all flavors, our family. Thank you for all of the wisdom, everyone. This is quite amazing. I think my job here is done. Actually, it's not, but this is wonderful. We are not necessarily going to do this every week, but it did feel like a good thing for me to do in my kind of first time up in front of you in this role, to invite us all to be in conversation. Oh, Lori, go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. The first thing that popped into my head when you asked this question is when Jesus was not joyful with us, or, with the people, turning tables in the temple, the money changers, the lyric in Superstar where he says, "My temple should be a house of God, or a house of worship, not a den of thieves." So what would bring Jesus joy would be doing the opposite of those things. So think of things that upset you, and I'm going to take this back to school for a minute, because my students do a lot of things that don't bring me joy, but the look on their faces when they were searching for gingerbread men washed all of that away. I couldn't think of what they do that upset me. All I could think of was when they finally found them sitting on their desks in the classroom and got to decorate them, and they were saying, "This is the best day of my life." So that's the opposite of what they do when I'm teaching math. And so I think that's what I think of it with Jesus is, he sees us doing good in the world, which is the opposite of what other people are doing in our country and world. So I think that would bring Jesus great joy.
Okay, so let's be clear here. By way of analogy, gingerbread is a house of prayer for all peoples, and math is a den of thieves.
Yeah,
Just want to make sure I'm getting this correct.
In the first grade, yes.
In the first grade, yes. Okay. Thank you, Lori, and thank you for your patience getting unmuted.
I'm sorry. I even switched platforms here.
You're fine. You're fine. So since I didn't answer those questions, I do want to share a little bit about some of my joy in relationship to this story. And I'm going to focus this on not Christianity in general, but what is sometimes called progressive Christianity. So I'm going to invite Dave to change to the next slide. This is material that comes from an organization called progressivechristianity.org. Now, no one in this room is under any obligation to call themselves a quote-unquote progressive Christian. I happen to call myself one. And so what is a progressive Christian? A progressive Christian is someone who holds certain core values. And these are some of those. We believe that following the way and teachings of Jesus can lead to experiencing sacredness, wholeness, and unity of life, even as we recognize that the Spirit moves in many faith traditions. We seek community that is inclusive of all people. We strive for peace and justice among all people, knowing that behaving with compassion and selfless love toward one another is the fullest expression of what we believe. We embrace the insights of contemporary science and strive to protect the earth and ensure its integrity and sustainability. And we commit to a path of lifelong learning, believing there's more value in questioning than in absolutes. So I want to tell you just briefly why these things bring me deep joy. Then we'll kind of wrap this part of the service. One more open question, and then we'll move along. So for me, it has indeed become a truth in my life that however failingly and imperfectly I do it, trying to follow this way in these teachings does indeed lead to experiencing sacredness, wholeness, and a sense of unity. And for me, that's just simply a source of great joy. I mean, I could probably try to explain that for 10 minutes, but none of us really want that, do we? And also, even though it isn't on the screen, I had the quotes shortened. For me, it really is meaningful to recognize that the Spirit moves in other faith traditions. That is actually part of my joy, because part of my sacred practice, my daily practice, comes from Buddhism. And I have to tell you, Jesus says, most notably in Luke, that the way to love your enemies is to bless those who curse you and pray for those who persecute you, right? The best way I have found to do that is to use the Buddhist loving kindness meditation. Some of you may know it, it's called metta meditation. To bless my enemies. It's part of my daily spiritual practice. Among the people I bless are, myself, my friends, this community, but I also try every day to include at least one enemy. And the politics of this time makes that very easy to do. But I think it makes me a better person to offer them that blessing, and so I'm beholden to Buddhism for teaching me that way of doing it. I don't think Jesus would object, I'm not sure, but I hope not. Seeking community that is inclusive of all people. So until about 2019, I would not have ever used a term like Jesus follower or Christian for myself, because I genuinely thought Christianity just did not have space for queer people like me. I mean, I knew it did, but I didn't really believe it. And obviously, as I stand here now, I believe it. I believe it so much I'm standing here now as your transitional pastor. So to me, the inclusiveness, the idea that we have a community that is inclusive of all people, we're going to struggle with this. We're not always going to get it right. There are people we like better and people we like less, of course. But our attempts to be inclusive are a source of deep and profound joy for me, and something I hope we're going to continue prioritizing moving forward. Striving for peace and justice among all people. So I don't think people can flourish as well in times of violence and war as they can in times of peace. I don't think people can flourish as well in situations of inequality compared to situations of justice. So when we strive for peace and justice, part of what we're doing is helping ourselves and each other flourish. And as we flourish, we have more access to joy. Embracing the insights of contemporary science, well, here's another opportunity to learn from wisdom outside of our religious tradition. Social science, natural science, medicine. I wouldn't be standing here today alive if not for the miracles of medicine. So I love that people who identify as progressive Christians don't see there to be a deep tension between science and religion, but understand them to be two different ways of engaging with the world, learning, growing, caring, and so on. And we better be striving to protect the earth, because we don't care only about our own joy, we want our descendants to have joy. And so there better be a planet for our descendants to be joyful on, right? So we better be protecting the earth. And finally, I love this business of committing to a path of lifelong learning. And again, I hope you see that the way I've structured today's worship has been about that. It's about all of us learning from one another. Not because I don't have plenty of opinions to share with you, and I will over time, but because there's something deeply humble about committing to a path of lifelong learning. And humility is a profound part of our tradition, the idea that we don't know it all yet, that there's more to learn. God is still speaking in the words of the very, very old Reformed preacher John Robinson, that God has yet more light to break forth, yet more wisdom to break forth, yet more joy to break forth. And so we commit to this path of lifelong learning together. So 2 last quick thoughts about joy before our final question for the room. First of all, I really do understand why love is the fourth of the 4 Advent themes, that it seems to build to love. I do understand that. But consider that it could also build to joy, because peace, hope, and love are all preconditions of joy. When we are peaceful, it's easier to be joyful. When we are hopeful, it's easier to be joyful. When we're loving, it's easier to be joyful. And finally, joy isn't just something we experience, as that opening quote from the Spirituality and Practice community suggests. Joy is something we can cultivate. We can work on it. It's a muscle we can build. So with that, here's our last question for the room for the day. What's one thing you can do to cultivate joy this Advent season and beyond? One thing you can do in your own life to cultivate joy this Advent season and beyond. Who wants to share their wisdom? Deborah. Lori, give me 1 sec.
How to say this simply and quickly. The only thing I have to control is my attitude and the way I react to things. So giving myself that breath before I react as I did yesterday to the pressures of Christmas. I was looking for a Grinch hat. And come back to center. Breathe. Stop. Cultivate joy.
Thank you, Deborah. Lori, go ahead.
I personally cling to what's not right in my life, and what I am trying to do, especially this last week of school, and with the holidays pending, is to appreciate what I do have and appreciate the people that love me for who I am and do not look for the things that I do that bother them. And some of those people may have come from my own body. But I'm trying very hard to mend those relationships too. So just focus on what I know I'm doing that does bring people joy, instead of dwelling on everything I do wrong.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Barbara, go ahead.
Just recognizing that most people are good people, good-hearted people, and they're not out to get me. And even if they express themselves in a way that I'm not expecting, or that's not what I would do, they still are good people. They still have a God spark, and they're still God's children, and just realizing that affects my my attitude.
Thank you. Cindy.
I deal with kids that are constantly reminded how terrible they are. And I find that when you see a person who's upset or in crisis, that when I remind them how marvelously they are made, the talents that they have, the capacity they have to manage stress, and just say, you've got this, You can do this. You're a wonderful person. You have good qualities. And you can see in their eyes doubt and gratitude that somebody told them they were of value. Catherine.
I walk around my neighborhood and all around in Old Colorado City, and so many people want to keep talking with me with Keisha. And it's annoying sometimes. I can't get home. Or I'm in the stores and I can't get out of there fast. But it is a blessing. But some days I can get a little bit sharp, and I'm trying to not do that. Because people really love the dog just as much as me.
A good thing to remember, yeah. Okay. So with that, let me end this part of the service with a blessing. I'll then run to the piano for our next brief worship song, and I'll then come back up here for joys and concerns. So, with all of these thoughts, with all of this wisdom that people have shared, for which we can be grateful and joyful, may the good news, however we understand it, bring us great joy. And may Jesus' joy be in us so that our joy may be complete. Amen.